Hello, everybody, and welcome to Dragged into Turbolasers, a Between the Bolter and Me podcast. This is episode 52, and I'm your host, Eric Wire, and tonight I'm joined by my two brothers, Adam Wire,
Hey everybody.
Greg Wire,
Hey everyone.
and I'm excited that our friend Eli is here as well.
Hey, everybody.
Yeah, so nice he could join us here tonight, Eli.
Oh, thank you
Um,
for having me.
Yeah, Eli's joined us, I think, a few times to talk about various things on a few of these episodes of the podcast. I don't quite recall what the last one was.
Who knows?
Was it Soul Wars?
Could have been.
It might have been Soul Wars.
I don't know. It doesn't matter a whole lot, but we've been friends for a while now, and made some cool models for the Curse of the Alabaster thing a little while back, and has a lot of cool background material that he's been writing about a particular Forge world that hopefully some later this year will continue to release some more information about the kind of a collaboration that we've been doing together. But there's always stuff going on, I suppose.
Certainly.
But I mean, I guess this particular episode, we were gonna change pace a little bit. It would be a good time. It would have been a kind of natural for us to talk about some of the newly released model, or not released, but revealed models in the last open day. But we'll save that for another time. We can talk about goblins later and all that stuff. Um, we thought for this we would talk a little bit about Blanchitsu, which is, if I'm sure most of our listeners are probably relatively aware, but a um, article that used to be or would be featured in White Dwarf now and again, largely showcasing models either made by John Blanche or other people, kind of exploring some different elements of Warhammer 40,000 and sometimes Warhammer um, that wasn't just based around playing like large armies fighting one another. But and recently, the White Dwarf magazine has sort of been redesigned and changed, and the first new issue in this new design was, I guess, was just this January, and it didn't have an issue, or it didn't have a, I don't know, one of these Blanchitsu articles in it. And I assume it was because of that, but it sort of a rumor started to go around that maybe they weren't going to be appearing in these articles anymore. And there's been somewhat of a buzz on Twitter and various things kind of about that. And we thought we could kind of talk a little bit about our sort of thoughts on that, and if we think it would be worthwhile to continue or if it should change in any way, and some of that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I wasn't really that surprised that it was absent because it's not really a consistent thing. Like, every time I would get one of the issues, it's like, boy, I hope there's a Blanchitsu article on here because that's like the most interesting thing. But it wasn't really a sure bet. So here, it's hard to really tell with the N of one. It could be gone. It could be coming back in an issue or two. But I think, despite that, it's created some interesting conversation about it in general. And there was sort of the notion of like, hey, everybody who's like into this and excited about it, like, try and drum up support for it and talk about why you like it, etc. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so
Not
that.
everybody likes it.
Oh,
Not everybody likes it.
Yeah, we can get to that part in a little bit, but kind of as you were saying, Adam, like I just because it wasn't in one issue, I don't think that really you could really draw any conclusions from that because yeah, it wasn't that. I mean, it was a regular feature, but it certainly wasn't in all the
everything.
issues.
But I think in general, it did. It's brought up a bunch of interesting topics and conversations, and I feel one of the big things is the notion of what it even is and like who is
Hmm.
it for? Like that I feel is a common question that particularly if you're newer to the hobby or you're focused more around just playing just playing the game as it say was intended, like Warhammer 40,000 or Age of Sigmar or something. Um, the articles are pretty, in some sense, pretty jarring. Like, there's like a page or two every so often with all these weird looking, interesting models. It's not really clear what they're for. It's not clear if it's just something a whole bunch of hobbyists are doing, if they're invited to do this stuff. Like, there's just very little information about it. And if you've read the articles, I mean, I should use the word articles loosely because they're a collection of pictures with a sentence or two, and it sort of creates an air of mystery about like what it is. And I feel the three of us have been sort of fortunate to somewhat be a part of the scene because we've made a bunch of models and we've actually been featured in that section I think 2 times. And so I think at one point during this we'll talk a little bit about like our experience with it and sort of how we even got to be in the section. And maybe it'll help some people get more of a sense of what it's about and like if you have any aspirations of doing something like that.
Well, I mean, maybe towards that end, like just to even start talking about this and like what we kind of think Blanchitsu is and all that stuff, maybe we should like kind of a lot of and why we even thought to talk about this was because Jake from Ex Profundus, he sort of tweeted about this that, maybe it's being canceled and that like he liked those articles and thinks that they were a good thing for to be in White Dwarf just because it was sort of offered sort of an outlet to show sort of an alternative way to participate in the hobby that's not like building huge armies or trying to paint with a very crisp like heavy metal sort of style. And someone
Yeah.
responded with a comment here that I guess I'll just read the comment. It's like I didn't like it. It offered zero opportunity for regular gamers to get on board. It's just models. They needed rules and background and suggestions how to get on board. It was a glorified ego stroke. Look at me and my friends having a great time, not you. You're below us, mortal. And I feel it's an interesting comment that
Adam, can you bring up a pic? Do we have a picture of that, like a screen cap of that?
I can look
No,
for one, but I don't have one like readily available.
well, it doesn't matter hugely, but so I feel I was a little surprised to see this comment just in the fact that I sort of was in just Jake's general thoughts that like to me it was like one of the only aspects of the White Dwarf that I was sort of interested in seeing because otherwise it's all just stuff like GW advertising the models they're selling. Like I don't need to spend $9 to see what's already displayed on their community page and on their storefront. Um,
Yeah.
and I don't necessarily need to read battle reports about a game I don't really play that much. So, but I think just this sort of dislike of it does bring up sort of some interesting points and kind of suggests how not everyone necessarily thinks of the whole Blanchitsu thing in the same light. I guess towards that end, like Eli, when you hear that the terminology, like what does that mean to you?
I assume that it is specifically talking about something that I guess models or an aesthetic that is inspired by John Blanche's like art. I don't necessarily think that it's the same thing as, INQ 28 or Inquisitor 28. I don't think that they're like, I guess, exclusive one of one another, I guess, or inclusive.
Well, so I'll just actually read from at least one of the issues at the start of the Blanchitsu thing. There's like a self-portrait John made of himself as sort of like an Adeptus Titanicus, or like an Adeptus
Administratum.
Yeah. And it says, for over 3 decades, John Blanche has shaped the worlds of Warhammer with his evocative artwork. His style has also enthused and excited many other painters, modelers, collectors, and Blanchitsu is our regular feature celebrating John's dark Gothic vision and their influence. And this month we have some, and then it like is talking a little bit more about what's going to go on in this. So that in itself very much suggests the notion this is a section that we're going to show a bunch of models that were in some way inspired by like John Blanche and his artwork or his own models. So I guess that in general is not, it's not very clear what that means. And I guess to me it's sort of just suggesting this is a section where we can just show what people are working on, interesting conversions, interesting paint jobs, whatever. So it's like an outlet to show maybe a more creative side of the hobby, or a side of the hobby where people take influences from the artwork, people take models and stuff from the game, but do interesting and unique things with them.
Yeah, well, Eli, you sort of brought up an interesting point in that, like, that it is somewhat hard to, like, how, and I think probably lots of people might just draw the line a little bit differently, but like, how does Blanchitsu relate to like Inquisitor 28, Inquisimunda, that sort of stuff, or even like Age of Sigmar 28 stuff? And I feel they're all pretty interrelated, but like, I don't think they're necessarily the same. But I admit, whenever I hear Blanchitsu, I kind of think Inquisitor 28, because like most of the stuff featured in those specific articles tend to be like just 40K models that aren't necessarily Space Marines or something, but looking at some different aspect of the 40K universe, which admittedly is usually about the Imperium and Inquisitors and stuff.
Mm-hmm. That, or I'd say it's probably also associating that almost like at least half, if not more, of the models that you see in Blanchitsu, you've already seen on the ammo bunker in the Inquisitor 28, like painting and modeling section.
Yeah, or like some of the Inquisitorum Facebook group.
Yeah.
And that sort of thing. But I guess one thing that's interesting kind of about the comment about not liking it and it needs rules and background and stuff. And do you think an article like this, these Blanchitsu articles, do you think they do need background rules, things like that? Like, is that even in the spirit of Blanchitsu?
I don't think so. And I think that's like, after saying it, I was like, oh yeah, it just makes me think of any model that's done in the style of like, John Blanche's art. But then when I read this comment and where it says, they needed rules and background and suggestions on how to get on board, it was just like, I was like, well, there you go. That's why you don't get it. But then that kind of makes me think, okay, maybe my definition of Blanchitsu is not right, because I instantly think of Inquisitor 28 and Inquisimunda. And I think of things that are right in my head and wrong. A prime example would be, I guess, when you guys made the stuff for the Curse of the Alabaster game, and you sent a group of models that you all worked really hard on, and you had like an idea and a background, and then you made rules to fit them on a realistic level. But then a lot of the other people showed up with rules that were just like, you can tell that they mainly played like 40K. So they knew what was good and what was not.
And stuff.
Yeah, they just min-maxed it. Whereas I think that's part of what makes, I guess, Blanchitsu or Inquisitor 28 like appealing to me, in that, you don't need rules. And that's a problem that I think anytime you see someone trying to like get into the circle, whether it's elitist or not, is they're just like, what rules do I use? Or like, this kind of thing. And I think the biggest part of it is just like learning you don't like there, you just kind of, you're supposed to have fun. And that's like the extent of it.
Well, I
And
feel like it's somewhat of a paradigm shift as to how to enjoy Warhammer, because I guess a lot of people came into it because it's a game and they want to play the game. I feel like
mhm.
the three of us came into it when we were like 12, and it's like, holy shit, those are cool models of neat things. And then we eventually learned to play the game, and I guess I liked it. I don't know that I ever thought it was like the best thing ever. And then eventually we kind of just stopped playing the game, but still like the imagery, still like the lore, and wanted to explore that. And whether we're playing a game or not, whatever.
I mean, I
Um,
haven't played a game for the most part in like the last 2 years. The last real game I played was the Curse of the Alabaster event, which I think was like 2 years ago.
Yeah, outside of Space Hulk, I don't know when the last
Yeah.
game of like tabletop
So yeah, I
40K I
think
played is.
yeah, I think that brings up like an important point. Um, I feel a lot of the people who are buying White Dwarf, for instance, not everybody, but like maybe a lot of people that are potential like newer players who like they got into it because maybe they played some of the video games or like Dawn of War, or they're really
Mhm.
interested in actually like playing Warhammer 40,000 or playing Age of Sigmar or playing Lord of the Rings. And then here comes along this other weird thing with these weirdly painted or crazy conversions and stuff. And it's like, what even is this? Like, is it something I want to do? Like, it's just not at all clear.
And
Mhm.
but I think one thing that's interesting about that, because like the Hobby Douche, as he's going by,
Yeah,
Also, that name is worth mentioning.
like
yeah,
he says like it's just models, but it needs rules, background, that sort of thing. But the thing is, a lot of this stuff, like there are rules, there are background, or at least the Pilgrim stuff that we did for a while back, like we wrote lots and lots of background. We came up with rules, like, and not every one of these sort of Blanchitsu thing necessarily has that, but a lot of them are featured from like some event and where people played something and there were rules. So at least some background was written. It's just not in those Blanchitsu articles. And the reason it's not in there is because the articles are like 2 pages long. And
Yeah.
like it almost it seems a little weird to me that it just like why is the Hobby Douche holding Blanchitsu to like some high standard of needing all this depth and rules and how to get into this when like the articles in White Dwarf have never been in depth. Why would this one be any different? Like, why would this
yeah.
somehow be like much better than all the other articles, like much longer, free rules all around, like
Well, and
all this
like,
background,
yeah.
how to do in-depth conversions, and why would anyone have anticipated that?
Well, and then on top of that, for a lot of these, they are based on like different events, or at the very least, they'll often say the name of the person like contributing their models. In this day and age, with like the internet and Instagram and stuff like that, all it would really take is a Google search, and you would probably find the same models that were pictured in the article, and there are like in many cases blogs that detail heavily like the conversion process, the painting process, the background, the rules. Like it's out there. All you have to
or at least
do is do a Google search.
search certainly for the stuff that we had that was in Bland Situ, like with our blog, like we wrote a shit ton of background
Yeah.
and we posted like stories we wrote. and we posted lots of progress reports about how we made this model and what parts we used and work in progress pictures and
And
then
like even
painting
how the
progress
event
stuff.
went and all that stuff. Like, so, I mean, I feel, and even towards that end, like some of our pilgrim stuff was featured in Blanchitsu. And when we were contacted by like the White Dwarf team, they asked us some questions and we provided lots of information about like the background, how we converted stuff. And like the articles, there just wasn't enough space in the articles
It was a
to release
page, a
that. So
single page, and so there were like 2 paragraphs worth of information. So
Adam
and
did a lot of shit to these models.
yeah,
I mean, I think it's more like this is the name of this character, and like a Scutari gun was used to convert some of it. Like, I mean, and that's not even to be a criticism on White Dwarf. Like, I mean, they have a limited
yeah,
Mhm.
base, and like, honestly, it would have been a fair amount of work to like edit all this stuff when it's not just like this is the price of the next new model or something. Like, so yeah, it comes back to what White Dwarf had traditionally been was short articles, some really nice photography, and
mm.
like I mean, I think that's fine. Like I'm all for just a magazine of primarily pictures. Like I don't.
That's what White Dwarf used to be, and no one bought it.
Yeah, it was that for a while. So I don't know. I feel it's interesting that he brings up these things, and it's almost like his complaint isn't for his or her. I guess his actual ad is Dangerous Joe, so perhaps that means it is a guy, but I guess it doesn't much matter. But like a lot of it, like just because they weren't included in all those articles doesn't mean it didn't exist,
Yeah,
or that even that the information was provided.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, I guess it does sort of suggest that it would be neat that if like they do plan to continue to have these sorts of articles, like they could expand them, have like double the page count from like 3 to 6 or something, and like actually
mm-hmm.
have more text about like the thoughts of the people who created them, give them space to show some work in progress pictures like that. All that stuff would be cool. Or like if they're gonna feature an event that took place, like actually make somewhat of a battle report of it, like or write the like sort of an account of it. Like all those things could be done, but I mean ultimately it would mean more effort and more space provided for us, which personally I think would be neat because um, in general, most of White Dwarf is catering towards like the the general player who wants to build a large army, not really convert it, use GW's like standard paint method, like base color wash, highlight with same base color, like that's as
Yeah,
well as look at some really high class heavy metal stuff. But I mean, that isn't the
gold
only
teaming.
way that you could enjoy, the hobby. And so I
Yeah,
think even without all that stuff, it still at least served a nice purpose showing that like there are a lot of avenues towards this. Like GW often talks in their rule book, like the most important thing is to have fun and create a narrative and such. And you don't necessarily always get that impression, but I feel these articles were at least somewhat good towards that end in showing that like it doesn't have to just be like go out buy the newest box of Space Marines and paint them as Dark Angels.
yeah. I feel like the whole thing was to try and be a glimpse at another side of the hobby where more effort was taken at like developing characters and stories and experimenting with how you paint or experimenting with how you convert. It's just like a reminder like, hey, you don't necessarily have to do everything the way it was intended. But I will admit, probably one of the things that they could do is if they really want to make this a regular feature is have something like that does a little bit better of a job explaining what it is and like encouraging people that, hey, why don't you like convert your models and do all this other stuff, and like that's what this is for. This is to celebrate the hobby and like the creative things people do with it.
I remember when they actually like talked about using green stuff in codexes. They don't do that anymore.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
it's
they
been a
used to actually
while.
show conversions and stuff.
I remember being like, "What is green stuff?
Yeah.
Where do I get that?" It's real.
I remember when I looked at codexes.
Yeah, I mean that's like
many years ago.
third edition Tyranids is I think the one like that's the one I'm thinking of. It was some conversion where they gave a Tyranid warrior a lash whip, and I was just like, green stuff. What? And
Yeah.
now I have
One
too much green
other
stuff in my
thing
house.
that, like, reading through some of the comments that spawned from this, there was a lot, like, at least some people would mention that, like, oh, like, don't know how to get into this, or like, I don't know how to paint. Like, how do I paint robes like John, or do these things like this? Thinking that a major element of this Blanchitsu thing is like kind of just like doing exactly what John does in models. And I feel that, to me anyway, is pretty counter to the whole idea of what this should be. Like, I don't think John himself really wants everyone to go out and try to like replicate his painting style or make models like he does. I mean, honestly, most of the stuff that has been featured in there aren't very similar to John's models anyway.
I'm trying to think of someone in that group that actually does paint in the same style, and I don't.
And certainly, like, the models that we tend to create are like nothing like,
Mhm.
honestly, nothing like most of the stuff that's ever featured in there. Like, the painting style is perhaps a little bit more precise, like, and we try to like focus on sort of more realism and scale and weapon size and all those things, which isn't necessarily often seen in that. And so, I mean, to me, Blanchitsu thing and just Ink 28 and some of those things is a lot more just about celebrating the freedom to like enjoy the hobby how you want to, or that's what I like about it.
Yeah.
That um
I would
and
say that to contradict my earlier statement, I guess really the whole Blanchitsu thing, it's more about when you look at the models that people make, it's more about the kind of things that you'll see in the background of a piece of like John Blanche art. Like not the
yeah,
guy in the foreground, but like, hey, what's that little weirdo doing over there in the corner?
not the Stormcast Eternal or
Yeah,
the Space Marine. Yeah, I
not
think
them. Like the
that's
guy that's like hiding behind like something that looks like it's covered in skulls, that he's like wearing like a hat that looks real silly. That's the guy that you want
and
to
I feel
make.
ultimately it's open for like a lot of interpretation. Um,
Yeah.
but to me, what's exciting about it and why I think it's a valuable type of article is just because it can showcase how you can do other things and you don't have to just do the normal thing. And I mean, the only reason we're still in this hobby at all was basically because we left the game behind and just started to kind of explore it in our own way. So in that sense, whenever you hear people talking about how like, oh, I don't know how to get into it, this and that, like, it's a little odd because to me it's a little bit more of a mentality. It's just like,
Mhm.
to do these things, like, all you really have to do is make models you enjoy making.
And want like a story. I think that
Yeah.
is very key.
Paint like stuff, like try to paint however you like to, build models you like. Doesn't have to
Yeah.
just be a space marine, and that it can fit in along with that stuff. Take inspirations wherever you like, and
I think,
Preferably not a space
yeah,
marine.
but even that could be fun. I think
Mhm.
the emphasis on some form of storytelling is, as we said, is key. Like, I mean, though, I guess people could just make cool looking things, but I think it's often more evocative if there's some sort of
At least a
theme
theme.
tying them
Yeah.
together.
Well, so I
Yeah,
mean,
I feel at least a theme.
this sort of comes back to the notion, like, and we could talk a little bit about how we sort of got into the thing. Like, our between the Bolter and me, it's like coming up on, is it 6 years now?
It's been 6 years, yeah.
It's been around,
January,
yeah,
just six
6 years
years.
the blog has happened. And so essentially, we started the blog, my brothers and I, we started it, yeah, 6 years ago. I guess it was around when we went to graduate school and we started sort of, we weren't all in the same place, and we wanted to start a blog to kind of keep in contact with like hobby related stuff. And at that point, we essentially just stopped playing the game. We stopped painting miniatures, like, but we were still interested in the hobby and the lore and the stories. And over time, we started to kind of focus on aspects of the hobby that we really liked, or started trying to investigate like the universe and change models and convert models into something that we thought fit in the universe, or that we thought were really neat. And that eventually led us to finally like actually start painting again, and finding other like-minded
Yeah.
hobbyists and stuff from all over, and through that, like, just sending emails, commenting on other blogs, and on top of that, putting out our own models, our own conversions, and showing that we were just interested in the hobby in general, and we were interested in other people's work. And then when we started hearing about different collaborative events and stuff like the Pilgrim, Tour Megiddo, all of that stuff, it was as simple as, wow, this looks really neat. I think I could contribute to that. And in many instances, we just simply figured out who was running the events, and we sent them an email and asked if we could take part, or at the very least send some models to be used in the events. Because like at this point, I feel like half of the models that I make and convert, I'm just sending to a fellow hobbyist across the world to use in an event.
Yeah,
So
it's true. It's
I
true.
feel the whole notion of this, it's really about you putting your own work out there and interacting with other hobbyists, talking about what you like, about what they're doing, etc. And then if you're really interested in it, just asking if you can participate in like different events. So
I mean, and that interacting, I feel, is like easier than ever with all these Facebook groups and stuff. When people post pictures of stuff, like you can comment on it.
yeah,
Mhm.
so I mean it's very different. Like when we started the blog, that was a very different time than it is like right now, like with the resurgence, or like Instagram, for instance. It in the past few years, it's almost been the death of a lot of blogging and stuff. But I mean, there's
The
just,
ammo bunker.
yeah, and
Yeah,
like the
the ammo
forums
bunker.
as well. Like not as many people are using that, but it's easier than ever to go online and see tons of different interesting conversions of people talking about new things they're working on or events they're taking part of. So, at least in our case, it was just about us being interested and seeing if other people were interested in our stuff, or would like to see us take part in the events and stuff as well. So, that's at least coming from our blog. And I guess in some sense maybe you could say we were lucky that we had an avenue where we had been presenting our work and stuff for a few years, and so then when we, at least people were somewhat familiar with our stuff, such that when we did like ask and talk to other hobbyists, they were like excited to like, oh yeah, it would be great if you
Mhm.
made a model or whatever. So
Yeah. typically if they know who you are and they know like what your stuff looks like, typically they're going to be a lot more excited to be like, oh, absolutely, I would love for you to send me something in the mail.
Oh, yeah, that too. Well, I mean, Eli, how did you made these models for like the Curse of the Alabaster? Like, how did you like become
I
involved in the thing?
I pretty much took a massive hiatus from like the 40K hobby, like after getting my ass handed to me at a grand tournament, and I did not play 40K for like 10 years. And then randomly, I don't remember what I was doing, but I found the Yig board. I found the Yig board online, and I was like, holy shit, this is the best thing I've ever seen. And I obsessed and looked at every picture like so much and just read all the stuff that was on the great Opus Mal, blog, and obsessed over that until I eventually noticed like a connection between it and a place called the Ammo Bunker. And then I went to the Ammo Bunker and I made an account. And I think at some point in time, I hit up Kraut Scientist.
Hmm.
Or
He's one
no,
of the
no.
he's one of the standout bloggers. He
Yeah.
still
I,
actually
I
blogs. Check him out if you
yeah,
haven't.
he's the one who actually pointed me towards the ammo bunker because I knew that he sent a model that was used in the Yig game, and I just messaged him and I was like, "Hey, I've been working on these models, which the pictures that I sent him I have yet to even finish." Um, but I sent him those, and he was like, "Hey, you should post these on the ammo bunker." So I went there, and the next thing you know, the Curse of the Alabaster got announced. And I said, "Hey, can I send you all something awful?" And they said, "We would love that." So I sent them something awful.
Okay, so again, you at least in some sense had a similar
Yeah.
experience to us. You were interested in the hobby in some form, and you heard about like an event or something you thought sounded interesting, and then you essentially asked if you could be a part of it.
Yeah, exactly. Just like, hey, that looks fun. Can I be a part of that? And typically, everyone is just like, of course, that would be excellent.
Hey,
Yeah,
I'm back.
but I guess in your sense, you
Welcome.
didn't actually attend the event.
No, no, I mailed my models to Isaac, and then I think he flew to the game for the Curse of the Alabaster.
Yeah, weirding way on
Yeah, weirding way.
Instagram and stuff in the ammo bunker. Many of you are familiar
Hmm.
with him. If not, look up Weirding Way. His stuff's awesome. He's incredible.
He's very nice.
Very nice. Great guy. Um, but yeah, so I feel at this point we have we've at least in some form been a part of a lot of different events, but I feel almost most of them we weren't actually a part of. We weren't actually there for the games. So we made some models we thought would fit in with the different events and like the prompts and stuff. Made some background and stuff related to that, and that's where we stopped essentially. So I feel
Yeah,
as
that is very.
Blanchitsu sort of like, at least in my mind, is a means to like celebrate the hobby and celebrate creativity and story making and stuff. It's like free for you to essentially do whatever you want. Like you can just be there for the sake of making, converting, and painting models. Be there for the notion of like the storytelling, the narrative aspect. Be there because you're really interested in like playing the different narrative based games. I mean, it could essentially be whatever you want it to be.
I
Mhm.
can see why if you're just into Warhammer for playing the game and building your armies and stuff, how it could be intimidating to just see all these cool models and maybe you can pick out like, oh, all these parts for this one dude are from all these different kits. Like, wow, that must have cost a lot of money. I don't know if I want to do that. I mean, that makes sense that you'd be apprehensive about that, but you don't necessarily have to spend a huge amount of money to push yourself and make something cool. I mean, the three of us have been into Warhammer for at least 20 years now. I mean, we just have a fuck ton of shit. Like, because we've been
Yeah, that
doing it for a
is very.
while,
Mhm.
and like new things come out that seem cool, and we'll buy them and not really assemble them. because they take time to assemble them, and then we just have lots of stuff. So like, I mean, we have a lot of parts. So admittedly, we're now to the point that like we see like, oh, there's a cool head in that $50 box set. Like, well, I guess I'm gonna buy that box set just for that head, and then put the rest in the bin. So
Well, so
we do
one
that, but
funny like add into that. So the Pilgrim Warband that we made, and that was sort of our first. That was our first event that we were a part of. It was our. I guess I won't say it was our first inclusion in White Dwarf, but it was our first like actual like article where we had a section in it. Um, the leader of the warband, her chair was the chair to a Warhound Titan from Forge World. So yeah, we bought a Warhound Titan. It wasn't purchased with the mind of like that's what we want, but that is the only part of the model we ever did anything with. So who knows?
Yeah,
maybe we're going about the hobby wrong. I don't know.
Maybe.
So I think I sort of derailed that, but I thought it was a funny aside.
But so, I mean, I think there are some other aspects to talk about some of these comments, but what I like to kind of summarize, like, I don't feel like Blanchitsu isn't a style of painting to be like John Blanche. It isn't even necessarily trying to make models that look like some of his artwork. I mean, John designed most of the shit in Warhammer 40,000, or had the general ideas for most of it. So even if
him and Jess Goodwin,
like, yeah. Well, I feel like John came up with a lot of the crazy ideas, and then Goodwin made like the designs then that were used for models. But regardless, even if like John Blanche's influence has been immense on the hobby, that like almost everything that's released is related to John Blanche in some sense. So like doing Blanchitsu related stuff isn't like, oh, you have to paint in his style or even necessarily make models that look like his models. It's just
his ideas permeate throughout everything.
It's you make stuff that fascinates you, but trying to explore some aspect of the lore and create a story, and not necessarily just make an army that you could play in Warhammer 40,000, not be tethered to what maybe a codex book says you need for this or that character.
Yeah.
I agree with that. Good summary.
And if you want to be part of some of the stuff, I mean, the best thing to do is just start making models and
start interacting with the community however you want. Whether it's commenting on blogs, commenting on Instagram posts, posting your own models on Instagram, starting your own blog, pasting stuff, putting stuff up on the different Facebook accounts.
And I feel like if you post your own stuff and then comment on other people's things, what's going to happen is somebody's going to see like, oh, such and such commented on my stuff. I'm going to go and look if they're doing stuff.
Yeah.
At least that's what I feel how people kind of discovered our stuff initially, because like nobody knew what our blog was.
Yeah.
And how were you even going to find it? It has a weird name. Like, how the fuck would you even find it? But I feel like we would kept posting stuff, and then we'd comment on other people's things, and I assume that at least a bunch of people found out because of that.
Yeah.
So I guess that brings up one point. I think an easy thing that White Dwarf could do to make the thing slightly more accessible is when they show someone's work, if they have like a blog or something that has more details about the stuff, just say like, hey, these people have like a blog between the bolter and me, go there to look at it. Or like this person like has an Instagram account, go there and look at it. Like they could just add like a single sentence, and then readers could at least be hinted at, hey, like if I'm interested in this, I can start exploring this more. And because that sort of brings up a notion, there's some notion of perchance like elitism or something in this, and like maybe some people get the notion like, oh, I'm always seeing the same people having all their stuff in these sections and stuff. Like I could never do that, or like that notion I think could start to arise. Because I'll go back to the first like series of articles that we were a part of for the Pilgrim event. I'll reread the opening thing, and you can judge for yourself. Does this sound elitist? For over 3 decades, John Blanche has shaped the worlds of Warhammer with his evocative artwork. His style also enthused and excited many other painters, modelers, and collectors, and Blanchitsu is a regular feature celebrating John's dark, gothic visions and their influence. And then a little later on, it also says, earlier this year, Warhammer played host to a remarkable gaming event planned and organized by John Blanche and his inner circle of his most dedicated acolytes, and some of the most talented and imaginative painters and modelers to have graced the pages of Blanchitsu. So,
that does sound a little elitist.
That right there goes. If this was the only thing you read, it very much sounds like, hey, these people are all John's personal friends, and they meet up with him every weekend, and so I think that's just not true. But you could interpret it in many different ways, and like particularly when they don't really give any indication of how you could be involved in it or where you could learn more about the stuff, I could see how some could take it that way.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, so I guess this suggests we're part of an inner circle, which isn't true.
Acolytes of an inner circle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's just telling listeners and stuff, like, in at least my sense, like, if you're interested enough in it and you do enough in like the hobby and try and put yourself out there and become involved in like events and stuff, there's certainly a chance that you could eventually have your stuff in like White Dwarf for that section.
Be in a cult.
Or be in a cult, that's true. Hey guys, we're in a cult.
It could go either way.
Yeah. Or you could enter your stuff in Golden Demon and hope to get pictures of your stuff taken and put in White Dwarf that way.
That is also an option.
True, it's true. It's true.
A little bit of this, a little bit of that, maybe.
Yeah. So I guess I feel a lot of this initial comment that spawned a lot of this discussion is sort of just based on the notion that it's not always that obvious what Blanchitsu was trying to do. And I feel that sort of gets at the whole notion of it. The whole, at least in my view of it, it's a sort of a nebulous thing where it can be any sort of weird, interesting conversion or paint job could eventually find its way in there. And there's not necessarily a right way or a wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one thing that I don't know, did anyone mention it earlier? But like there's this 28 magazine that's kind of in the works by some people, particularly like a digital sort of free magazine. People are working primarily headed by James Sheriff and I guess Alexander Winberg that is supposed to come out relatively soon. That I feel, um, and its whole focus is to kind of showcase various Blanchitsu, Inquisitor 28, and all those sorts of things with different articles about conversions and painting tutorials and such. And I feel honestly, I mean, obviously it's not released yet, so I haven't seen the final thing or anything, but um, I read a few articles and such, and I feel it might be it'll probably be a better way for people who are maybe unsure of what this sort of stuff might be to see.
Yeah, I mean, this 28 magazine, fan made magazine, like, I feel like is trying to do exactly all the things that people, I think, would have liked to see in the Blanchitsu thing. It's a bunch of people submitting articles about like models they made and maybe the story behind them or how they made them or their inspiration behind them. So I feel like at least it's intending to be everything people might want out of one of those Blanchitsu things.
But
Yeah.
instead of spanning 2 pages, it'll be like a whole magazine. So that's something, if you're at all interested in the Blanchitsu articles or Inc 28 or Age of Sigmar 28, or essentially just like miniature painting and converting in general, that's something you should uh, pay attention to and look for its release.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's basically just 28 hyphen mag.com. And
Yeah.
that's like a website that has a little bit about it and such. So it shouldn't be too hard to find.
There's also an Instagram for it.
And a
Mhm.
Facebook, I think.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. There are.
So I think we've certainly talked about this subject a lot. Do we have any other points or anything that we think we should mention, or anything that we forgot to say, or whatnot? Silence.
I don't know. It's just to hit up on the point that, like, if you like Warhammer and the lore and have your own ideas about what something could be, but you don't necessarily see it in any of the models, you could try to realize that yourself. And that's basically what the Blanchitsu mentality is, or
Yeah.
how I view it.
Yeah, I think ultimately, like, if you like the setting and the universe and the models, like, just explore it and do what you want with it, and it could probably fit in there in some way.
Yeah, do your own thing and get out there and communicate and interact with the community itself. Because I
Yeah.
feel most of these events, the events focused around this stuff, they're all collaborative events, and oftentimes there are people from all over the place. Like the Pilgrim event we first took part in, or people from like Finland, Denmark, the United States, the United
Sweden.
Kingdom, Sweden, like, so all over the place. So um, start making your own models that are sort of like a small piece of like your vision of the universe, and then get out there and comment and like interact with the other people in the community. Lots of people, I'm sure, would be glad to see your work and any state
You
of it.
decide your own level of involvement.
Yes,
Yeah.
Um, and there, it's on the internet, so there'll be plenty of people that could comment and like give their own like opinions about it. And I know at least the three of us, we've certainly learned a lot just by putting our own stuff out there and asking for suggestions from people. and
That's how we met.
we've all learned a great deal from all of that, and are essentially always willing to listen to like both the good comments and the bad comments about our work, because a lot of the stuff I've learned a lot from that.
Yeah, I feel usually the most valuable comments are the ones that have some form of criticism, because
they get you to
learn from that.
They get you to re-examine what you've done and like maybe question, like, why is it this way, or why did I do it that way, or like maybe you just realize, you know what, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah. Just having Greg tell you that that's not how guns are shaped or work enough, and then eventually when you get it right, you're like, "Fuck yeah, I did it."
Yeah, that's not right. That's not right.
Like that was seriously probably the best criticism I've ever gotten. Is hearing Greg just be like, "That looks good. It looks like a functional firearm." I'm just like,
I did it. Yeah. And again, like all the different criticism and comments, like you're free to take them as you will, like either learn from them, like ignore them, like, because in the end, like maybe they brought up a good point, but maybe that's not your vision of how things should be, and that's fine. And I think, I guess another thing, I've always liked the 40K universe because how it is often presented, it's like there are like almost an unimaginable number of different worlds, so you could foreseeably, anything you could come up with, like you could say, like, there's probably a world with people on there that look like that, or whatever, it fits.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a world that all of the inhabitants look like Funko Pop vinyl figures.
Yeah, I think
that's
true.
A different subject.
and if it's not like in the Milky Way, then it's just like, oh well, it's in the warp. It's on the other side of the map. You can't see this place.
True.
So
you don't want to see this place.
So you will see, like, that brings up a funny point about the notion of there's strong indications that Funko Pop, Warhammer, and Warhammer 40,000 things are going to come out, and if they do, who knows, maybe we can become a part of that too, and we can turn that into whatever we want. Who knows?
Fuck, if they're a thing, I mean, we almost have to do a live unboxing on here and send them to people. Almost have to do it.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Eli looks like someone who wants a Funko Pop Space Marine.
I mean, honestly, I might put it on my desk at work next to mine. I have one, and it's the Alien Queen. Other than that, my desk looks very professional.
Well, so I can say one thing. If they make a Funko Pop Space Marine, which I think the silhouette they showed was, the proportions of that aren't much worse than the normal Space Marine models. So, like, whatever, guys.
Would they really be that much worse, though?
Yeah. Oh, shit. The Funko Pop of the Alien, the Xenomorph Queen, is actually quite good.
It's actually really badass.
I mean, I guess it helps that the Alien Queen has the fucking huge head.
It does have a huge head.
Yeah,
it's really big.
Yeah, that's the best Pop figure I've seen.
Just hiding behind my computer at work.
So maybe in the future there'll be a Blanchitsu article about converted Funko Pop figures. We'll see. We brought it back. All right, everybody. Does anyone have any other final words before we end the podcast?
I think it's good. We're good.
Yeah.
Enjoy the hobby in your own way.
Yeah, get out there. Build stuff you think is cool.
And interact with the community.
Yeah. So, thanks everybody for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.
That was amazing.
Fuck it, Duck. Like, my computer fucking crashed halfway through.
Oh, so I guess that probably means you don't have the recording.
I think I recovered some of it, and so I feel I'll probably be able to piece it together, but Jesus Christ. just at one point I was like, let's click to see how long this recording's been going. Then I realized like none of the clicking was doing anything. It's just like, Jesus Christ. Like, and then the computer was blue screening for a while.
Are you serious?
That's not good.
Yeah. So,
Oh,
yeah. So I don't know. We'll see. We'll see how this works.
where is the export button?
It's just
It's
export
under
audio.
file.
Okay, where did I not? I see import. Chains. Oh, export. There we go.
I don't know. I think I'll still be able to do it, and at the very worst, like maybe I can just take the audio from the actual.
Hey everybody, we're
I'll
still
do-
live on Twitch.
Yeah, we're still Twitch.
I like that.
Funko Pop figures. Funko Pop figures. Let's get them. We're
People
gonna get them.
excited. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's not a surprise that it's happening.
No, I think
But it's
people had
still-
always sort of thought, based on how things were changing at Games Workshop and how
Monopoly games are Warhammer 40,000 Monopoly. Once that's happening, it's not a far stretch that.
No. Ugh.
Yeah, I don't know
I
how I feel about it.
absolutely-
I'll probably buy one. We'll certainly show some on the stream.
Well, so yeah, so that's probably the bad thing. Like, I think it's pretty dumb, but like, we'll probably buy one.
Yo, no, we'll buy them for this for the sake of this Twitch channel. We're gonna be sent. We'll get them. We'll open them, and we'll send them out to our fans.
That could be you, Elon.
I like that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I hope that they're all.
I would assume there'd be
Oh,
a Space
Marines.
Marine, probably a Sister of Battle, probably an Imperial Guardsman.
There won't be an Imperial Guardsman. I call
Maybe.
bullshit on that.
There could
There
be
should
be.
There will. I feel
It'd
eventually
probably
there
be a
will
Chaos
be,
Marine.
but I
Holy
assume it'll
shit.
be Space Marines.
The next best Funko Pop I've ever seen is the one of Majin Buu from Dragon Ball Z. Majin Buu. I mean, fuck Dragon Ball Z, but it's a pretty good Funko Pop figure, largely because his head like looks reasonable.
There's a cool one of Judge Dredd. I always sort of
Yes.
wanted that one. It looks good.
The Judge Dredd and the Doom Marine.
Yeah, they all look pretty
Yeah,
good.
yeah, it's
Those look pretty solid. I
Or go.
obliterated my finger at a difference in size.
Holy shit.
And the fact that this one's
Oh
purple.
fuck yeah, man! Oof.
Yeah, I did that whenever I was messaging you all, and I was like, hey guys, I'm going to take the trash out.
my
That happened
God.
when I took the trash out.
Oh,
And I've been trying not to look at it, and I'm pretty certain my fingernail's like going to fall off tomorrow.
It looks really bad, man. Oh,
It's really gross.
I'm
Like,
sorry, man.
yeah, that's rough. Fuck a duck, man.
it's just real purple. It's just real purple and real big.
Oh,
God.
I just thought I would share that with you all now.
yeah.
Yeah,
I haven't burned the shit out of my hands with liquid nitrogen too badly recently. Maybe like 2 or 3 weeks ago, I burned the hell out of like a few of my fingers. Like, oh my god.
That's awful.
It was bad. It was really bad.
I've had a CO2 burn, like, but it's been years. But I mean, it wasn't like bad enough that I was like, I gotta go to the hospital. It was just like, oh shit.
Yeah, so mine wasn't that bad, but like blistered all over some of my fingers, and like